Hello, and welcome to Women with Books. I'm your host, author Lindsay Emory. I know, you're only here for the Sarah MacLean episode, and you will not regret it. It is great, but I have you here, so I am going to do the announcements super quick. Okay. 1. There's still time for you to let me know your ideas and suggestions for Season 3 of Women with Books. Email me, shoot me a message on our Facebook page, but let me know because I always want to hear from you. Number 2. Women with Books Summer Reading Challenge is going on. Reference my last episode for all that detail. Reference my blog at lindsayemory.com/blog. I've already seen people start to use the hashtag on social media, hashtag Women with Books Summer Challenge or WWB Summer Challenge. And I'll do the same. Mark your books, and we can talk about what everyone is reading this summer. Look for me on Instagram at Lindsay Emory. Number 3, The Royal Runaway, my next book coming October 9th from Simon & Schuster Gallery Books, is on pre-order. Go buy it. Number 4, do you want to win a copy of Sarah MacLean's latest? Sign up for the Women with Books newsletter for more details. And number 5, Women with Books is open for sponsorship opportunities. Go to womenwithbooks.com and send me an email at lindsay@lindsayemory.com for more information. And now, finally, it's Sarah MacLean, everyone. Welcome to Women with Books. I have today a very special guest, Sarah MacLean. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you. So I want to start off telling you a little story.
Please.
You signed a cover flat for me at an RWA. I cannot remember. It was probably the last time we were in New York, maybe San Antonio, but I think that might have been too early. Anyway, it was the cover flat for Never Judge a Lady by Her Cover.
Oh, I love that cover.
I do too. And I keep it above my desk, and I don't think I'll ever put it down. And I do it, I'll tell you why. I do it to remind myself of that moment at the end of No Good Duke Goes Unpunished.
Uh-huh.
That
you're
moment.
I think you're about to
I'm
spoil
I'm not going to spoil it, but everyone who knows
Spoiler alert, you guys.
If you don't know, go back and read this whole series, and you'll know. At the end of No Good Duke Goes Unpunished, there was a gasping moment where I just freaked out, immediately started ripping out all my copies of books, flipping through things, and... So
Lindsay, we can talk about it if you
like. We can?
It's been a long time. It's been 4 books. I feel like you either know it or you don't. I mean, if you don't, you should probably stop or skip ahead.
Yeah, skip ahead 30 minutes or so. No, I'm kidding. So at the end of this so you had a 4-book series, and at the end of the 3rd book, you revealed that one of the main characters was not a man, as we had all been led to believe through our own...
Well, had you been led to believe it?
Right. No. Through our own assumptions or perhaps prejudices.
Sure.
We found out that he was a she. And everyone gasped. There was a gasp heard around Romancelandia.
Around the world.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's for those of you who haven't read that series, it's the Rules of Scoundrels series. And... when Lindsay says a main character, I think what she means, for those of you who are romance readers, essentially the Big Duke at the end. The sort of like king vampire, Big Duke. Not that this person is a duke or a vampire, but it's like there's that series, the person who everyone is waiting for, their book.
You're waiting for the mysterious person.
That hero was not a hero, but a heroine.
Mm-hmm. And it was such an important moment for me as a reader and a writer because, I mean, truly, it was a moment that you remember how fun and how good a book can be. And I always want to remember that.
You are very kind.
Oh,
thank you.
It's not kind.
And I'm so glad it worked
true.
for you. It, most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, I hear people talk about that series. They tell me that they were surprised. But I will tell you a funny story, which is, so that was the 4th book in a 4-book series. the first book in that series came out, A Rogue by Any Other Name, and I was doing a tour for it in Texas, and it had been out for about 30 seconds. And I did an event in Texas, and I walked into the bathroom after the event, and a woman in the bathroom said to me, she cornered me in the bathroom and said, "I think Chase is a woman." And I was so shocked because I was sure that in that book nobody would have gotten it yet. And I sort of backed up against the bathroom wall and I said, well, Chase would be really upset if he heard that from you. I went and I hid in the bathroom stall for a while. And if you read the author's note on Never Judge a Lady by Her Cover, the last line of the author's note is an apology to that woman for lying to her because she knew all those years ago.
She knew. She was hurt.
She was a really close reader. She recognized that I never used gendered pronouns.
That's amazing.
When I was talking about Chase, and truthfully, I think most readers are not that close readers. I mean, I'm certainly not that close of a reader. So
that woman, hey, if you're out there, you need to be someone's beta reader.
I know, right? My gosh.
Catch some things for me. You have written 12 books, is that correct?
Yes. This is my 12th, Wicked and the Wallflower.
Yes, 12th book. And 11 of them historical romance. Your first one was YA historical, or how would you classify this?
It was YA historical. It was basically a very clean historical romance about three young girls in the Regency. It's sort of a friendship. It's like a little bit of a friend book, a little bit of a romance book, a little bit of a murder mystery. It's sort of lots of things.
Well, I mean, with so much historical romance, I have to assume you love it. And what do you love most about writing historical romance?
I mean, I've been reading historical romances. They were my gateway into the genre when I was, 11 or 12, when I read my first Sue Devereaux book. And so I think for me, there's that piece of it, which is just that they're sort of coded into my DNA. They're imprinted on me. So the idea of writing anything other than a historical romance just would never have crossed my mind 10 years ago when I wrote my first book. But also, I think there's something really powerful about being able to write at a time period that isn't ours, and being able to play with themes that are so modern in an older setting, largely because over the course of my life and my studies and my writing and my reading, I've come to realize that the role of women and marginalized people in general in the world hasn't unfortunately changed a whole lot. We're still fighting a lot of the same battles that we were fighting in the 1820s. And so while it was certainly worse then, and I would never argue that it's exactly the same, I would say that a lot of the themes still exist and they still feel really present and they still feel really important and they still feel like they're worthy of discussion and it's sometimes rage. And so being able to tell those stories through a historical lens is always really interesting to me, because I think it gives me a little bit more freedom to maybe say things that would be more difficult to say in a contemporary, because they'd feel a little more, as my mother would refer to them, militant.
I think you're right. I had never thought of it quite that way before, but I don't think historical romance would resonate quite so much still with the modern woman if we didn't have anything in common with them. Mm-hmm. If we were just like, oh, we're totally, beyond the feelings of, that this person is having. And so obviously there's a universal thread. It's not just womanhood. It's the situations we can find ourselves in. So that's really interesting.
And also I think there's I'm not going to deny the fact that the dresses are gorgeous, and there's a lot of like Prince Charming wrapped up in this kind of, the mythology of the princess is very wrapped up in historicals, no matter even if the hero's a duke and not a prince. So I think that's a piece of it too. This idea of you're able to rarefy the world in a way that maybe it's more difficult to do in a contemporary.
When I had Megan Frampton on the podcast, I learned a new term, wallpaper historicals. Mm-hmm. And she kind of helped me understand. She kind of put some people on the wallpaper historical spectrum, and she put you more on the research historical accuracy side. And then when I was reading your latest book that's coming out, I think by the time this podcast is released, I started noticing more things that I assume you've done research on, like lock picking and a whispering bench. So do you have to do a lot of research for your books, or do you just know a lot about icehold smuggling?
I just know a lot. No. There's a fabulous podcast called 99% Invisible, which is about design in the world, and every episode is about some interesting piece of design in the world. And there was this great episode about, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, about perfect security and how essentially security is a myth, and the reason why we put locks on our doors is to make ourselves feel better, because there's no such thing as an unpickable lock. But for about 50 or 60 years between the 18th and 19th centuries, there was such a thing as an unpickable lock, and it was called a Chubb lock, and it was invented by an Englishman, and it was self-protecting, meaning if it detected that you were trying to pick it, it would lock itself, it would jam itself, and the only way to unlock it was with a special key, and nobody could pick it. And it was fascinating, and what actually ended up happening was there was this sort of war between Americans and Englishmen, where for 60 years people tried to pick this lock, and finally somebody did. And you should listen to that episode, and hopefully, Lindsay, you'll put it in the show notes for this.
I will. Is it a good podcast for kids? Because I can.
Some of the things are probably like, I don't know. I would say sort of older kids, like eight and up.
Yeah, mine are middle school, but I think that sounds like they would love to know about how stuff's made and everything.
Oh yeah, it's such a cool podcast, and the guy who does it is a guy named Roman Mars, and he's just great, and I can't recommend this podcast enough. Anyway, so while I was plotting this new series, and I knew I wanted to write a book, I wanted to write books that weren't about sort of ballrooms and the Regency the way, and well, I don't write in the Regency anymore, but the sort of 19th century, the way that romance usually writes it. I wanted to write about kind of underground smugglers, and I wanted that sort of darker element, which I've always sort of flirted around with my books. And lock picking became a piece of it. And so the heroine got to pick the lock, and got to be a lock pick. And she does it sort of as a nervous tick. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Like when it makes her feel calm to pick locks. And the hero is a smuggler. And so I had to do the research for that. And I'm very flattered that Megan thinks that I, do a lot of research. I think I probably do a lot less research than it seems, because I watch a lot of Frozen, and then I say, well, now how does ice really work?
Well, I thought that was ingenious. Okay, I'm just going to start talking about the book now, because
please.
I have just been like wiggling in my seat, waiting to talk about it. So there is ice smuggling, which I was fascinated by. I'm just like, that was genius. Whoever came up with that, was that you, or was that real?
Well, the smuggling part is me. The ice ships is real. Okay. Ice is obviously commodity, right? And before refrigeration existed, there was a lot of demand to keep things cold, because if you could keep meat cold, for example, you could eat it for longer. We talk a lot about the most important innovations in history, and I think we often don't give refrigeration the. This is super exciting for listeners.
Okay, it is exciting in the book. I can guarantee you that, because you make it such an integral part
Yeah. So
and it could even be like a larger metaphor, if you will, for society or women yeah. Ooh, that's good.
I mean, the issue is that they needed to bring ice, right, to London.
Yes.
London's a major metropolitan area. It needs to have ice. It's the summer. Ice doesn't come from England in the summer. And so they were just bringing it on ships. And the ships, but ice melts. And in the 1830s, it really melts. There's no way to keep a ship cold. And so they would bring in hundreds of tons of ice and it would melt. And so the ships would come in up the Thames. They would have to come in on high tide. The Thames has a terrible tide. Like high tide and low tide on the Thames are like vastly different. So the ships would wait outside and they would come in during high tide almost sinking because of all the literal water that was inside them. They were sinking themselves. And I had this idea that like, wouldn't it be cool? That would be a perfect way to smuggle, contraband in because nobody would ever, they couldn't get on to the ships to investigate the holds because there was so much water in them. So it was so that was the idea. The smuggling was mine.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, so we've mentioned it before. I want to mention it again. The title is Wicked and the Wallflower, and the hero and heroine's names are amazing. Felicity Faircloth and the Devil, which I think would have also been an outstanding title of a 19th century puritanical novel, Felicity Faircloth and the Devil.
Oh, it should have just been Felicity and the Devil. That would have been hilarious. And,
yeah. It's good. I mean, those names are so good, and you also use them to very good effect in the book. And about the lock picking as well, it occurred to me that there's a scene where Felicity is picking a lock, and it's sexy. And they are not even touching each other. And I'm just like, oh, baby, put it in. Yes, twist it. And I mean, it is so sensual. And you could see, it's so good. But that's a first. And that has to be a first in historical romance. Yeah.
Sure.
Did someone compare it on Twitter to the Italian
Job?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, heist movies are definitely my favorite thing in the world. So, I mean, if people see the Italian Job in it, then I'm all for it. So,
yeah. Well, it feels. I mean,
it's not a heist, though. I should.
No, it's not.
Qualify.
So let me just
like the locks are important to the book, but there's no steal. There is stealing. I mean, the hero's whole job is stealing, but the
heroine isn't stealing anything
exactly.
except his heart.
Except his heart.
So your very kind Avon publicist sent me a ARC and a little PR package, and like I said, I've read all your books. I don't need the PR package, so I just dove right in. And while I was reading it, I swear to you, I'm like, this has a Peaky Blinders feel to it. I mean, it's very much like a Sarah MacLean novel that everyone knows and loves, but I definitely got that. There was a scene where there's like a bunch of activity and movement, and it definitely felt like a Peaky Blinders thing. And so imagine my surprise when I actually open up your PR package and it says, "It's very taboo, meets Harlots, meets Ripper Street, meets Peaky Blinders with smooching." So I felt very proud of myself and proud of you for actually doing that. And I recognize all these shows except for one, and it's one you talk about on Twitter a lot.
It's Harlots.
Harlots.
No one knows about Harlots, you guys. It's so good.
Here is your chance to evangelize for Harlots.
It's so good. Lindsay, you should stop talking to me right now and just go watch every episode of Harlots. I mean, so, okay. So
where is it? Where is it? An Amazon show?
It is a Hulu show.
Hulu. Okay.
That's probably part of the problem. Yeah. Most people don't have Hulu. But you can watch Hulu. I'm going to get this wrong, I think, but you can watch Hulu for free either on your computer. You can watch Hulu for free with ads. But like Hulu's like $16 a month. Just buy it for a month and watch all of Harlots. But actually you should wait because the new season of Harlots is starting in July. So you'll want to watch 2 seasons of Harlots.
Okay.
Anyway, Harlots is about brothels and bordellos in London in the 1700s. So it predates my books by a lot. But it's basically about sex workers. The cast, the characters, the writers, the directors, the creators, they're all women. The crew is something like 80% women. And it is a show that was like the feminist balm I needed in late 2017. And I've since watched it like 5 times. I'm obsessed with it. And essentially it's about 2 competing bordellos in the 1700s, and all the women who work in these bordellos, and the sex work, and essentially it just talks so much. It's a conversation about power and the way that sex and power interact, and how women can claim power through sex. It's super intersectional. It has lots of characters of color. It has queer characters. It's set, obviously, the bordello. One of the bordellos is sort of a higher end bordello that services the aristocracy. The other one is a lower end bordello. There's a lot of class discussion. It's so cool. It's so thoughtful. It's so important. And most importantly, it centers the female body and the female gaze and female sexuality and female pleasure and female power so perfectly that I think it's a tragedy that more people don't know about it.
If you have a referral link, send it to me and I'll put that in the show notes.
I will. Like, all I want is that when they announced season 2, I was like, who can I write episode recaps for so that I can get screeners of this show? Because I'm so obsessed with it. One of the creators follows me on Twitter, and I'm like beyond excited about this. Like, it was the most exciting day of my life when she followed me. And like, I love this show. And I just want more people to watch it.
I will definitely check that out.
But to your point, like the idea was that I partially was just getting tired of writing aristocratic scenes with aristocratic people. Like I had just written a whole series that was really set in ballrooms and like country house parties with like women who wore beautiful dresses all the time. And I wanted to write something darker. So I started, and I had just been watching all these period dramas and loving them. And not just because Tom Hardy was in 2 of them.
Oh, yes. There was a moment I was at a watch party for the royal wedding.
Yeah.
At Elizabeth Essex's house.
Oh, I saw that party on the internet, and it looked so fun.
It was amazing. But when Tom Hardy showed up on the screen, half of the room went, ah! And then some of the other people were like, who's that? I'm like, I can't with you.
Well, he was real bald.
He was real bald.
Yeah, real bald.
Yeah.
No, well, I got up at 5:45 in the morning to watch it here, and I like kind of padded into my living room like bleary-eyed, and I turned on the television, and I wasn't wearing my glasses, and I happened to turn the TV on right when the camera was on him, and I was like, oh my God, Tom Hardy's at the royal wedding. And I was like, this day is very on brand for me.
Yes. I was like, well, I had Idris Elba there too. So basically all of Romancelandia got
everyone got
wedding, and then they're...
God, wasn't that wedding the most amazing thing?
Yes, it really was. And I've been reading and listening to podcasts and think pieces since then, and it really was just extraordinary in that it showed love and affection and intimacy in a way I don't think we'd seen before from that genre of wedding, if you will.
No, I mean, it was so joyful, and I just loved it. It gave me such joy, that whole event. So,
in fact, I've been thinking a lot about, and bear with me while I draw this parallel.
Sure.
But you famously, after your last book, and it's at the tip of my tongue.
The Day of the Duchess.
Day of the Duchess. You famously told the world about how you had a draft and you threw it out.
Yeah.
When things changed in 2016. And honestly, like, this wedding, I've thought about that several times in the last few days. Like, I just want to like throw out what I'm working on right now and start from this new optimistic modern place. I'm not really sure what that is going to look like yet, but I'm taking a cue from you that it's okay to throw things out.
It is okay. It's terrifying and not really, doesn't feel great. No, but I think that's so important. I think you're really hitting on something, Lindsay, which is, the world has been, no matter what your politics are, like, you can't deny that the world has been really in a place for the last 18 months. And I think that the royal wedding, at least for us, for romance, the romance world, and I think also for kids, I think, I think for women in general, and certainly for, I think for all of us, like, the royal wedding really represented something very powerful and important in a way that I couldn't have predicted it would. For me, like, sitting on my couch with my 4-year-old at 6 o'clock in the morning, it just felt so hopeful.
It felt so hopeful.
Like, everything will be okay in some way. And that's an amazing thing.
My daughter's in middle school. She plays the cello. And she's sitting there watching it, and she's like, that kid's 17, and he's a person of color playing cello, and millions of people. Even something that small.
For the Queen of England, yeah.
For the Queen of England. And it's just like, everyone could take something out of it and see themselves in different spots. It was cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
well, it just felt also like there was this moment of, and this is going to, I don't know, this is going to sound probably kind of weird, but like, I had this very weird moment of like national pride while I was watching it too. Like, this sort of like Meghan Markle is the best of America right now. Like, I'm so conflicted about so much that is represented as America in the world. But like, if Meghan Markle is like our ambassador to the world right now, I am on board for it,
I know exactly what you mean. When the preacher was preaching, and even if someone is not religious in America, that cadence, that accent, that tradition of American style preaching, I was just like, that language that he used is what we are used to here. And Barack Obama and Martin Luther King and all the great orators, I'm like, I am hearing my language come back at me from Windsor Castle, and I just got cold chills thinking about that.
It was amazing,
like, how far we've come since 1776.
I
know. But yeah, going back to the book that you threw out and the ways that the world changes, and you were talking about in Harlots, that we can start creating art to reflect how we're seeing the world, and for better or for worse, the bad, ugly, good parts. And so I want to thank you again for just being really honest with yourself and with your audience about the way you did have to throw out a book and start fresh because you couldn't tell that story anymore. And I think that your new book too is you're seeing that too.
I think the new book is certainly, I hope I'll never be in a situation like I was with Duchess, where I woke up shattered and just realized like I had to change everything. It was a particular mood, and I hope I'm never there again. But I think that the struggle, and I have certainly made a lot of people angry over the last, however many months, being very public about, how I reconcile the work that I'm doing and my work as a writer with my politics as a person and my life as a human, right? And I think that a lot of people feel like, well, her books are going to be, she must be putting her politics in her books. And one of the things that I struggle with when I hear that is there's a difference between politics, capital P, and politics, lowercase p. I don't think that, for example, I mean, certainly politics, capital P, can be seen in the story arc of The Day of the Duchess, because there are little nods to Elizabeth Warren and the Women's March and the this, that, and the other, but the politics lowercase p are in every book written by every person. And for me, Wallflower was very much about Wicked and the Wallflower was very much about telling a story about women in the world, which is a thing I've done for 12 books. And I didn't think about it very much as like a political book, but I think my politics certainly are in that book, just as your politics are in your books, and everybody who writes with small letter p politics.
Yeah.
And I think that's a struggle for a lot of people, because it feels like they're afraid to open the book if you're vocal about your thoughts about the world, but it feels like now is not the time to be quiet.
Right. A friend of mine recently received some correspondence from a reader, and who complained that they were being political by including a lesbian in their book, and it was a side character,
Sure.
Just someone who is living in the world,
happens to be gay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's just really upset about it. This reader is really upset about it, and is like, you don't need to be playing politics in this book. I want an escape. I don't want to have to read about this. And it got me thinking, and a couple of other writers, we all started talking, and we're like, but everyone we put in our books is political. Everyone.
Sure.
If I put they had a cat instead of a dog, it could be, I have feelings about dogs. If I put, I'm not trying to reduce all of it.
No. And the people you don't put in your book also say something, right? So,
right.
I think, oh God, we all get it, right? Like my favorite review for Duchess is a 2-star review. I think it's on Amazon, and it says like, I don't come to historical romances. I wish my favorite historical authors would stop putting politics into their books. And what I love about it, and it's one line, that's the full review. And what I love about it is that it was 2 stars, because it was like, she couldn't bring herself to give me 1 star. Like she was like, I enjoyed this book too much. Right. But I think that for your friend and for others, like, those people, the people who feel that way about human beings in the world being in your book, they're probably not going to like your books very much, ultimately. Yeah. So maybe it's best to be rid of them.
It's funny because my friend also had the review also said something like that too. It was like, this would have otherwise been a charming and well-written book, except you put a lesbian in it.
Sure. Sure.
Which just ruins the whole thing for all of us.
Terrible.
So
let that person not come back to your books, and then you won't get a bad review.
But it kind of makes me want to write more lesbians. And,
of course it does. It makes you want to write a field of them.
And you've got some okay, I have to ask. Cat? Is that the
Cat?
Nick, yes.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry. You should ask the question.
I don't really know what I want to know about her. I just want.
Are you asking me if she's a lesbian?
I don't know. I don't care. I just want more. Is she going to come back?
She's coming back.
Okay.
She's coming back.
She?
And she is a lesbian.
Okay.
And you will see. She will have an arc. It's just not yet.
Okay. I kind of figured, but like I said, I didn't really care. I just thought she was a really cool character. And again, really cool characters can be lesbians too. It's fine.
Exactly. And I think it's more a question now of being really conscious as a writer. And this is the thing that I think we're all going to have to come to in our own way with our own work. But for me, it feels very part of the reason why I think I moved away from that sort of rarefied society, the aristocratic society, is because I wanted to make sure that I was able to portray London historically accurately, and really show the world that London was in the 1830s. And it's hard to do that when you're playing with, that sort of super, super high class, because you rarely get to show merchant class. You can show servant class, but it has its own sort of issues, but you never get to see working class, like dock workers. You never get to see the merchant class. You never get to see like the middle class when you're playing with, that sort of like high level. And when we're talking about, the truth of what the world looked like in the 1830s in London, it was incredibly diverse. And so being able to moving the whole world to, or moving a series into a world that is filled with merchant class, working class, dock workers, suddenly it opens the doors to a variety of different characters who I had been writing kind of around in the edges, in the background before this, but now I get to put them all center stage.
Right. I mean, in 1830, England had control of how much of the world, and
I know. And
some of them would have traveled back in a boat.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the Royal African Company it started in the 1600s. The East India Company started in the late 1600s. So the boats go both ways. Dock workers, there's some data that say that dock workers in London were as much as 40% people of color. And again, like merchant class, working class, servant class. We never talk in historicals about the fact that, slavery was outlawed in the UK, a good while before it was outlawed in the US, but certainly like there were many slaves in the UK. They were people of color largely. Like those people all, moved into society. They didn't leave.
Right. They didn't poof in a magic smoke.
Yeah. I mean, it was rare to see a duke or a duchess, but who was of color, but that doesn't mean that, there weren't exceedingly wealthy people of color too. So there's, it's an interesting time to be writing romances and historical romances, that is. And I think we're all making really important choices now to show the world the way that it was.
Well, I'm really into a lot of these alternative settings and alternative, if it's Egypt or India. I feel like I read those when I was a kid and then they kind of disappeared. I read some books. I know I read romances set in India when I was a kid.
Sure.
I'm scared to go back and look at them now.
Yeah, I wouldn't. They don't hold up.
But I just remember being so entranced by, because I was a kid. I wanted to learn about those places. And so, I mean, that's what I learned. But I would love to go back. And so I'm constantly asking for... people that write me some stories in other places.
Yeah, I mean, I would really love, and I talk about this a lot with, in the world, but the struggle that I have with India is I want own voices stories. Yes. That are historical romances from India. And I know that that's a challenge. I know that it's not easy to tell the story of colonization, particularly when you are an own voices author. But gosh, I would love some India set historicals by, Indian women.
Yes. We're going to put that in that universe. There might be some. But that's the thing, is I'm always saying there might be some. I don't know it, so y'all bring it to me.
Exactly. I have asked many, many people in the world who I think of as having encyclopedic knowledge of the romance genre, and no one has been able to provide me with a name. But if you are listening and you have a name, please, please, please find me on Twitter and tell me.
Yes.
Give me recommendations, because I would love to be able to read those. But yeah, no, it's a huge problem. I mean, colonization is tremendously problematic, and we spend so much time as historical writers writing a world that doesn't ever even think about it. And that's, of course we do, because it's hard to do. It's hard to have that conversation. But I think now what's really great about modern historicals is that we're writing with open eyes. Many of us are writing with open eyes.
Right. And I think a lot of us don't have that conversation because we don't know what we don't know. And that's,
Sure.
You don't. And so that's why it's like circular. We don't know what we don't know. So we need the books to tell us what we don't know. And
exactly.
Then, then we know what we want in the future. And I'm very inarticulate about that. But yeah, so I'm always constantly saying, like, y'all just tell me what there is, and I will read it, and then we can get more of it. But speaking of, so you are asking for these books because part of your job is a reviewer for the Washington Post.
That's true.
You also keep a huge reading list on your website, and I'm going to put that in the show notes because it's like worthy of a deep dive if anybody's looking for a good book to read. But I have to ask you, because it's something I talk about a lot here, how do you keep your reading brain and your critique brain and your writing brain separate? Or is that not a problem for you?
I think I'm a voracious romance reader. I've never stopped that as my first job, my first identity. So even I read a book a day, and I read a book a day even when I'm writing. I mean, maybe a book every 2 days when I'm writing, but when I'm really like on deadline. But I can't survive without that piece. So for me, I come at it first as a romance reader. The benefit of the work for the Washington Post is that I get to just choose the 3 books of the month that I loved the most. So I don't have to critique publicly, which was part of when I accepted the job. That was the one thing I said I wouldn't do. I'm never going to disdain the genre in public, or books in the genre in public. And so for me, I just get to pick my favorites, which is so easy because I just get to sort of sit back, relax, and read as a reader, and then say, like, this book was one of my favorites of the month. And invariably, every month there is a different reason why the books that I picked are my favorites. Some of them are tremendously fun and like sticky, lovely, like delicious confections. Some of them feel really important, and they show how romance can exist simultaneously as a literary confection, and also as something that teaches us or helps us grow or helps us know ourselves better. And it's just a fun job. And of course, when everything that I read informs what I write. You hear a lot of writers who say that they don't read in their genre because they don't want the noise of it. They don't want to steal ideas or steal, or end up writing something that's too similar to something that they read. But I think I don't think that's ever been a concern for me. And also I think the genre gets better as we iterate on each other.
I like that.
So, and I mean, I think about that a lot because when I wrote the Rules of Scoundrels series, which is the 4-book series we talked about earlier, it's set in a casino world. The 4 men, or the 3 men and the heroine Ona, they own a casino together. And I plotted that whole book after I had read, the back to back the first 6 or 7 books in J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood series. Because I was like, how do I write this like brotherhood of men in an interesting way and set it in a historical? And so, like, without J.R. Ward's vampires, the Rules of Scoundrels wouldn't exist. And I don't necessarily think that there's much else that's similar about the 2 series, but she definitely informed that work.
Oh, that is fascinating. Yeah, I never would have put those 2 together, but now that you say it, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more we read in the genre, the more we learn from each other, right? And we can, you can find something really fascinating, really important in somebody else's book and say, I want to explore that in my book too. And, you know, you're not going to write the same book.
That's so fascinating because for me, I'm mainly a historical reader, but I'm completely intimidated by the idea of writing a historical. So I've told myself before, I want to try to write a historical in a contemporary setting, which is a lot harder than you think because there's no carriages.
No carriages, too many cell phones. I'm blown away every time I read a fabulous contemporary. I'm blown away by the bones of it. Like how do you tell a conflict-laden, like emotional, brilliant story at a time when, you know, it's really fine for you to walk away from the other person, right?
It's fine for you to walk away, or it's fine for you to go sleep with them. Just go sleep with them.
Exactly. I mean,
what's the problem?
So great contemporaries for me, and this just shows that we always admire the people who do the thing that we don't do, but it feels to me like contemporaries are the harder thing to do. Writing a great contemporary is really difficult, I think.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Because I always get back to, where's the conflict? Why aren't you guys just shacking
Why
up
can't
together?
they be together right now?
Yeah.
Or not together. Like, why can't they just say, well, screw you then. I'm going to go on Match and find someone else.
Right. I have single friends. I know how it works these days.
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always look forward to your reviews. Although now that I know they're not technically reviews, I don't know. And that makes me love them even more because they are really books that you just picked out of your pile and were like, these were the best this month. And that's fun. But since you have such a huge list on your site and you have a column, so I normally ask people for book recommendations, but since you've already provided that, do you want to provide more?
I'm happy.
Okay.
So I'll just give you a couple that I thought were really great recently. I just finished Naima Simone's my first book by her, which was Scoring Off the Field. So anybody who follows me on Twitter or knows me in life knows that I have a real problem with friends to lovers as like a concept. Like it takes a lot for friends to lovers romance to work for me because of conflict. I'm always like, I don't understand. These people love each other. They're already friends. Why can't they just be together? But this book was delicious. It's an unrequited love story. The hero is a football player. The heroine is his best friend from high school. She's also his personal assistant. It begins with her quitting her job because she is like so totally in love with him and has been for like more than a decade, and she just can't anymore. Like she realizes that it is toxic for her and she needs to have her own life and she needs to just get over him. And he is destroyed by losing this idea of like losing this person who has not only like been his friend forever, but also is his assistant and like keeps his life in order. And so it's a beautiful story that's like kind of it's an unrequited friends to lovers story. And it was delicious and so sexy and just great. And it's part of a series, and I have downloaded the next one, and that is, you know, probably going to be the book I read today. And then the Kate Clayborn's Luck of the Draw I put in the column this month, but it is so good. It's possibly one of the best contemporaries I've ever read. It's a fake fiance story, but the heroine is the heroine has won the lottery with three of her friends. The conceit of the series is each friend, it's three best friends who bought a lottery ticket and they win, and then it's like what they do with their money and how they find love. And so she wins the lottery and she does what a lot of us would do, which is quits her job as a corporate attorney who does like pharmaceutical settlements for wrongful death. And as part of which, of course, I would quit that job right away too. And but she's still very like this. She can't find joy, and she realizes at the very beginning of the book that the reason why she can't find joy is because she has a lot of guilt about the job that she did, particularly in settling the death of a certain person. And so she goes to apologize to his parents and make amends. And she turns up at his house, and at the house of the parents, and their grown son is there, and he calls her on like the utter narcissism of this behavior, like this whole, like, how could you possibly believe that you coming here to apologize would be for us? It's not, it's for you. And she realizes it in the moment. She like takes the knock, which I think is really brave of Kate to do, because it wouldn't necessarily happen in a lot of books. But she takes the knock and she says, like, I'm a big girl, and if there's anything that I can ever do, you know, I'm sorry, but call me. Like, here's my card. And he's like, well, actually, I need a fake fiance. And then it's like a fake fiance story, which is delicious. But then he has a great deal of guilt over his brother's death. She has this like guilt over her culpability and like the resolution of the death. And it's like both incredibly thoughtful and important. And the brother happened to die of an overdose, an opiate overdose. So it feels really current too. But then at the same time, it's a fake fiance story, and who doesn't love that? So it's delicious and highly, highly recommended.
Oh, I can't wait to get to that. I read her first one. She was actually on the podcast. I met her last year at RWA. She's amazing, and I read her first one. I have not read that one yet, but
I have this. I just downloaded the second one too, so that's
this is the third one. That's right.
No, I'm sorry, this is the second one?
Okay,
no, I just downloaded the first one because I haven't read that one.
It was amazing, and she's
so talented.
Star.
She's a new author. Everybody should go read this book. It's so great. I love finding new authors, like brand new authors, because I always feel like if their books are great at the very beginning of their career, like we have decades to go of great books, and that's always useful. And I always have recommendations, but I'll just give you two, and then you can link to the rest to my recommendation page, which I update weekly, almost.
Do you only read romance, or do you ever read outside the genre?
I read a lot of history, like I read a lot of research texts, and I read I would say like 95% of the books that I read are romance. I read YA sometimes.
Could be that's why you're such an advocate.
Yeah, I mean, it's where my joy is. I figure life is too short for books that don't give you joy.
I love it. Well, we are running out of time, so if you are prepared, I'd like to go into the lightning round.
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. Let me get into
like one. You want like one word answers as quick as possible.
If you want to. Now, I will say that most people, there will be a question where they have to go into detail, and that is fine. Okay. Because it's just, we're getting some other info out of you. Okay.
Sure thing.
Dark or milk chocolate?
Dark.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
When your phone rings, do you answer it?
Yes.
How do you normally waste time on the internet?
Oh, God. Pictures of Tom Hardy with dogs.
Worthy.
That's very true. Like, and especially if I'm having a bad day, my husband will come in and be like, "Are you just looking at pictures of Tom Hardy with dogs?" Yes, I am.
Isn't no one wasting time though?
No one loves dogs like Tom Hardy loves dogs.
This is true.
Google it. If you've never Googled it, Google it. It's a thing. Tom Hardy.
It's almost research. Actually,
clearly doesn't like people, but he loves dogs. So,
on your next vacation, will it be to the mountains or the beach?
The beach.
Do you call it soda or pop?
Soda.
On a romance cover, do you prefer abs, forearms, or a chiseled jaw?
Oh. Abs, I guess. Okay. I'm thinking of those, I don't know if it's Jackie or J.C. Burton. The ab covers, the sports covers, those were really terrific. So I'm going to go with abs.
Okay. Although on my last podcast with Amy Reichert, we identified like a subgenre of abs. So there's like greasy tattooed abs, and then there's white puffy shirt abs. and that
Oh
you
yeah,
can
no.
also...
I'm gonna go with tattooed abs. Wait, was Gracie not was that supposed to lead me away from tattooed
No,
abs?
no. But like they usually look sweaty. Maybe sweaty is a better word.
Yeah,
Like sweaty.
glistening. Like they have their own light source. Like Charlize Theron ads. She has her own light source. Like it's like she travels with it, I think. So
Yeah.
but she would be those abs.
And the very important last question, what are your feelings about turning to the last page of a book first?
I always do it.
Really?
Always.
I'm shocked by this, Sarah.
I really am. So if like there's a great irony to the fact that I wrote a series with like a massive twist in it because I hate them. I mean, I love them. But I hate not knowing. So I always read the end first.
So if you had been a reader when you got No Good Duke Goes Unpunished,
I would have known.
You would have.
It's really depressing when I think about it, and also because that book, when we released the arcs of it, we embargoed the epilogue so that people wouldn't know until the book came out. Because we didn't want.
Even the reviewers
we were
didn't
so
know.
aware of like the spoiler being there that we were like, if it gets out in review, because if it gets out in the before the books come out, then it'll be everywhere. And so we did a whole like please keep Chase a secret campaign when it came out, and people really did. But I acknowledge that the irony of that is that I absolutely would have read Chase a Secret first.
And I think we'll end it there because I love that we started off talking about Chase a Secret and we're going to end with it.
That's great.
A good story just always wraps itself back around.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to do. Thank you so much for being on today, Sarah. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Lindsay. This is so great.
Thank you for joining us today. I started this podcast so I could have the conversations I wanted to have about books. And by listening, you're part of the conversation too. Contact me on our Facebook page or on social media if you want to talk some more or sign up for the fantastic newsletter. And please leave me a review. 5 stars if you love books. Thanks, and keep reading.